Mike Z, the game director, just posted an incredible update over on the main website talking about the future of Guild Wars 2 and laying out a roadmap for all kinds of features and stuff that up until now ArenaNet had been really tight-lipped on. It's really amazing, and I want to run through it all with you guys. So just to back up for a quick second, last month there was announced the big layoffs over at the studio. They revealed that some of the secondary products at ArenaNet, the studio, hadn't been going well. People were being laid off. Now, on the surface of it, if you see an MMO developer drops a ton of devs, you might think the MMO itself will suffer. But there were some suggestions maybe it might mean that there's a new invigorated focus on Guild Wars 2 itself. And then we come to this blog post, which really seems to confirm that. Things that the devs were kind of cagey about before, now they're being open with. I really think this blog post is coming at the exact appropriate time, in that the community wants to know there's exciting things coming. They want to know that the game's not shriveling and struggling. And, well, here they drop this. So I'm going to read it through with you. Mike Z on April 2nd. No, this is not an April Fool's joke. What do they say? Hey everyone, over the past few weeks, most of our team has been focused on getting the next couple of releases ready, which will culminate in our Living World Season 4 finale. This isn't news. We knew that the Season 4 finale was coming up soon. The data mined tome for this season suggested there were only going to be 6 episodes, and, well, the 6th episode is on its way. Obviously, the big story bomb and stuff, everyone's waiting with bated breath. But they also say, meanwhile, we're also looking towards the future. Now, this is where things get interesting. Normally, they don't tell us anything, really, except vague and very long-term plans. I'll note that this concept art with this, by the way, is not new. So they say this: our philosophy. I've been speaking with members of the team for a few months, examining the way we create content to make sure we continue to do what's best for the game. Lately, we've been scrutinizing not only our plans for Season 5, so that's what's coming after this finale, which we already knew from last year in summer would be a direct sequence. There wasn't going to be an expansion between the two. So they say they've been scrutinizing their plans for Season 5, changing their plans perhaps. But our core development philosophy, ultimately we believe that our core pillars of Guild Wars 2 have not changed. They encourage players to interact positively, no loot stealing, and everyone can revive everyone, all these things that we've all enjoyed and forgotten to really remark on over the years. Support player autonomy. Focus on horizontal progression instead of vertical. Build upon previous designs. This one's kind of funny considering how the game went for a long time, but I do believe since Heart of Thorns they have tried to adhere to this. And lastly, strive for the fun. This might look really kind of weird and like an empty platitude almost, but if you look back at release, those of you new guys on the scene might not really remember this. Back when they were talking about Guild Wars 2, they did say that all the time, that they tried to eliminate as much what they considered to be busy work as possible, and if the moment-to-moment was fun, then that was all that really mattered. I think that's led to them being fairly short-sighted over the years, but that's another story. Anyway, the living world of Guild Wars 2 is a great way for us to accomplish all of that. It's the best way to provide our player community with regular content, great features, new horizons to explore, and an engaging story that brings our world and characters to life without charging a subscription fee. You might not believe in this because you might not be a huge fan of Living World. I personally think that Living World is pretty incredible and continues to improve, which is the important part. But hey, and now here's what they say. The new Guild Wars 2 team structure. So if Living World has not been enough for you in the past, well, what does this mean for Guild Wars 2? We are taking the opportunity now to reorganize ourselves into 4 fully staffed content teams. Not just one, right, on Living World. 4 fully staffed content teams with additional teams dedicated to supporting the core game like skills and balance, rewards, world versus world, and PvP. So I don't think they're saying they're having a fully staffed PvP team or but they are having a dedicated team to it now, and a different dedicated team to world versus world, and dedicated teams to some capacity they've already had for these. But it sounds like these things might be fleshed out. They don't necessarily consider this stuff content, right? I mean, it is playable and worthwhile to the game. But when they say a fully staffed content team, I believe that's with regard to building Living World episodes and new maps and stuff like that. Content teams will have more flexibility to decide what makes sense for a given release. For example, we could focus on expanding the boundaries and content of an existing map if that would provide a better experience than creating a new one. Ultimately, this will mean a relatively steady release of new content that will allow us to continue telling the story of Tyria in new and exciting ways. Now, this is an important sign. If we read between the lines, what this is essentially saying is future Living World, they're not going to force themselves to do new maps every time. that maybe we'll have a release without a new map. And they're trying to say with this that doesn't mean it's a quality drop, but it's that the new map will be substituted with something else that's worthwhile. And you might not believe that that's really possible. I certainly do, though. I think that a lot of core tier areas, hell, even Season 3 areas, expansion areas, could do with big improvements. I want you guys to imagine this. A Season 4 finale, or, you know, Season 5 or whatever, that focuses on story in the domain of Vabi rather than anywhere else. And maybe there are small extensions like what we've seen with Season 3 when there was the White Mantle base added as an extension to Brisbane Wildlands. Maybe there will be small extensions, but largely it takes place in Vabi. And what does that mean? That means the Vabi meta event can be improved and actually looked at, and flow of those maps and rewards on those maps can be improved, and Path of Fire itself is better for it. And new people coming into Path of Fire don't feel themselves coming into abandoned maps. Think about the Desolation. What if there's a Living World episode based all around the Desolation that means that Realm of Torment meta event is tuned up and improved and made more fun? Maybe we actually get to explore the Realm of Torment now as a part of the newly expanded meta, but also there's lots of new things going on at the Bone Palace because there's story appropriate reason for that to be happening. I know Joko's kind of exited, but that's what I'm getting at. Locking themselves into always adding a new map, or always adding a new mastery, or whatever some of the other things they feel are red lines right now. By taking those red lines away, in theory, Living World could be better. I don't know whether I really stand that it will 100% be better, but we can at least say that Season 5 seems it will be quite different to Season 4 and 3. Next, they talk about the next few months specifically. Now, this is what you've probably been eagerly anticipating me to talk about based on the title. What's next? Well, we just released the Super Adventure Festival, so players can return to Moto's Game World and experience the homage to the games of yesteryear. This obviously wasn't a massive update this year in terms of we didn't get a whole new world, but it was a big update, and that's nice. Then they say this. After that, the current activities team has a release that will build toward the Season 4 finale. So, when Season 4 leaves, we're not just going to be sitting in silence waiting for the finale. There's something in the middle, who knows what. We're in the process of wrapping up Episode 6, the finale, now, and we're excited to not only announce a release date, but also to play the finale alongside you. It won't fall within the 2 to 3 month window that we tried to target through Season 4 because of the adjustments we had to make in February, but stay tuned, more info is coming. So, you can see how wordy this is. They don't want to blatantly keep going in circles and shine a light on the fact they had to let off a ton of people. So instead, they're describing this horrible moment for the studio as adjustments in February. But that's what they're talking about. Look, the studio went through hell, and it will have pushed the finale back. They do want to do a release date, though. We're currently adding more polish to the final encounter in the next raid, which continues the story of Kadim, and will get its own release after Episode 6. So this is news. We would have expected the raid to be with the episode itself. This seems to have been delayed probably because of the adjustments. It's also news that it's definitely an expansion on the Kadim story, which, as you guys know, if you watched my coverage of that, has the big cliffhanger at the end as Kadim runs off and vanishes as that shadowy spirit. I'm really excited and hoping this is the hidden city of Adashim, which we saw had a world map art update recently too. In fact, I'm almost 100% confident that's what it's going to be. They're saying we're utilizing one of the new team's efforts to build some additional small-scale open world content, so all our players will have something to celebrate with the release of the raid. Now, this is interesting. When the Kadim Wing itself came out, the adjoining Living World episode was talking about the raid. You could find a bounty board where some Jinn were talking about what was happening. It seems that they liked how the community reacted to that, and they're going even further with small-scale open-world content to double into it. I guess because the finale and the raid wing themselves are not coming at the same time, that means maybe we should have a different thing to pair with it when it comes out. And that's going to be the small-scale open-world content. The future, here we are. The Commander's Tale will continue in Living World Season 5. As the teams get going and plans become more cemented, we'll be able to talk a bit more on that topic. That essentially means no expansion after Season 4, which we knew. And here, we also have our sights set on a few new features that have already been in development for some time. So these have been going on behind closed doors. We've speculated that they've been going on behind closed doors, but the devs have never been blunt about it until today. Please understand that these are all works in progress, so details can change between here and the final version, and we don't have a timeline for the release of any of these. They even bolded this. I think that's the only thing they bolded in all of it, so remember that. These features will ship only when they are ready. The rune and sigil salvaging release last year was in anticipation of legendary runes and sigils, the final components of legendary core equipment. Legendary runes and sigils. Now, I take you back to what they said at the start here. They're pillars of game philosophy. Focus on horizontal progression instead of vertical. Now, that's kind of strange, isn't it? Because if they add legendary runes, I mean, what can a legendary rune be? A tier... We currently have, you know, masterwork runes give you 2 benefits, and then a rare rune gives you... You can stack it 4 times for additional benefits, and then an exotic rune you can stack 6 times for 6 benefits. When they added Ascended Gear, they never did it for runes, because that would be power creep. That would be vertical progression, which Guild Wars 2 stands against. So there weren't Ascended runes, and there weren't Ascended sigils. That, you know, there's not an Ascended Sigil of Force that's 6% increased damage. It all stayed at exotic. Ever since 2012, exotic. Now here, they're saying that they're making legendary runes and sigils. Given that in the exact same blog post, and for all these years, ArenaNet really has adhered to this, aside from tiny little peanuts like infusions, okay? I do believe that this won't be stat creep and power creep. I do believe that. The question, though, is how can I say that and also reconcile with what on earth a legendary rune or sigil can be if it's not improved power? Even if we say this is horizontal, like you get a legendary thing and it's not 5% damage, it's 5% some new attribute, right? Like it's horrible, it's more options for you. That still feels like a dangerous and scary territory to go in, because if there's some kind of perk that you're looking for only available at the legendary tier, well, you've kind of just put us in the same position of it requiring legendary stuff for people. I guess the really boring version of this is just it's a single rune that you can turn into any rune in the game, similar to how legendary armor is stat swappable and legendary weapons are stat swappable. You could now have a single rune that you can turn into whatever you want at the time, and maybe that's worthwhile. It doesn't sound that exciting, does it? The final side of this is cosmetics. Quite often Guild Wars is about horizontal progression, but cosmetic horizontal progression. That's the point. We stick with cosmetics. So are they going to be runes and sigils that give you some kind of visual component? What's left for Guild Wars, though? Among the auras and stuff that you can get everywhere now, is there really any visual space for this? I guess that's a question when we talk about legendary accessories and rings and stuff, which, as we know, with the current raid is coming out. But yes, new legendary equipment. I still think it was a failing of Path of Fire not to add mount saddles and stuff, which could have been tiered up in their own right, and there could have been legendary versions of that for us to go throughout this period of the game's life. But they're going with this. So, and by the way, I think the only reason they're announcing this is because they've been working on it for a long time. I hope they have a cool idea. Next. Over the past few months, astute players have been noticing a trend of updates and improvements to how our skill slotting system works, and have accurately speculated, that the long-requested feature of build templates is in the works. So, yes, we have been speculating build templates are a thing. I think you can go back, not just over the past few months, but for the past few years, frankly, and see signs that the devs were interested in build templates and did want to do things with build templates. It's kind of a tacky, asinine, very juvenile, adolescent thing to say, Guild Wars 1 had build templates, so why shouldn't Guild Wars 2? Guild Wars 2 is really complicated with its item systems. It's got a huge amount of things to factor in and consider. But when we're at a point where members of the community have managed to approximate build template systems through third-party add-ons, it is kind of one of those things where it's like, all right, we need a first-party solution from the devs, please. I think they've been working on this a long time. Who knows what they've got factored in? There's a whole video in this all on its own. I do think that there will probably be gem store integrations with such a thing, and that could be good for the game's finances and life and so on. But we'll have to talk about that at a later day. This is news, though, guys, that they genuinely are building build templates, and it's great to see them saying this. Next. A bit like the legendary rune and sigil discussion, we have a similar one here. We'd like to increase the max cooking level from 400 to 500. This crafting profession needs a refresh to make lower tier foods important to the ecosystem and to help reinvigorate various resources throughout the game. I won't give you the whole spiel of, all right, if we've got level 500 food, does that mean it's more powerful food? Does that mean it's going to be more work to get it all of those discussions about, you know, vertical progression? But I will say I adore this line about lower tier foods being important to the ecosystem. It is true that a massive amount of gathering and a massive amount of crafting in the game could be really fun and exciting, but is completely ignored and has been ignored just not for just the past few months, not the most recent year, not the couple of recent years, but the past 5 years or so. The amount of different interesting and cool, flavorful, fun foods that are in the game that just do nothing, they just sit dead on the TP, is criminal to me. I hate seeing stuff like that. I hate seeing dead attributes of Guild Wars 2 that could have life in them. And so I'm actually in favor of a cooking level increase if it means that the discipline as a whole ends up being really enlivened. And that's exactly what they're saying here. Reinvigorate various resources throughout the game. That could make gathering more interesting. I'm well up for this. I would have thought that they'd do this with an expansion, frankly. But they seem to still be going with the not talking about expansions tack in this blog post, whether they have any planned whatsoever. Final thing I'll note with the food is, yes, there is that well-known fact that at launch, they never added any many fish-related recipes. Out of all the hundreds and hundreds of food recipes and different delicious meals you can make in Guild Wars 2, very few are to do with fish. And the reason they did that, the devs are on the record of saying this years ago now, that it was so that they could have space for fishing later. And so I always thought that level 500 cooking would be associated with fishing somehow. But they're not talking about fishing in this blog post, so I don't know, maybe that's changed, if it was ever a thing in the first place. Next, we've mentioned in the past how important world restructuring is to our World vs. World initiatives, and that hasn't changed. So we don't have to get into that. You know, it's the big World vs. World Alliance update. Who knows when it will come. While the programming team is focused on this initiative, the team is also focusing on smaller updates that can temporarily change the game mode, like the no downstate week we've done in the past. Also, frankly, the Warclaw, the new mount they've added, that's basically in line, right? It's a smaller thing going into World vs. World while waiting for the big Alliance update. We're also talking about different types of reward structures for events. Honestly, this is a really boring paragraph that doesn't help much. If I was a World vs. Worlder, I wouldn't take much comfort in this post. It's not really changed much. Here, for PvP, Swiss tournament support is the next major feature for the SPVP team. This feature will be utilized by our structured tournaments moving forwards. We already knew that they were working on that. We already knew it was taking a little bit longer than they wanted. That's what we got. But they do go a bit further with those two on this final section, further down the road. Beyond all of this, here is some of what's on our radar for the future. None of these have been fully designed, are even more subject to change or being shelved. So remember, this section they're already working on, okay? And not finalized, but they're doing it. These are still not fully designed. For World vs. World, we're talking about changing the matches so that scoring matters in 8-hour intervals. This allows us to address gameplay in off-peak hours in a way that doesn't invalidate the work of the most active populations. Who knows how much this will help? I would say that 90% of the developer focus for World vs. World over the years feels like it's been struggling with the phenomenon of off-peak. So, hey, this doesn't surprise me. This is what they're talking about. After cooking 500, jewel crafting is the last profession needing to be extended, though they have no ideas with this just yet. And you don't even have, like, the fishing idea to key into that. And then finally, and, you know, Ascended is such a difficult thing when you look at trinkets. And finally, the competitive team has been working on the idea of building a festival that highlights both SPVP and World vs. World. It's a fun concept that would allow us to focus on those game types and try new things. So, there's a cynic in me that immediately is unenthused by this and would really like to see the competitive team do something else. I mean, really, because there's so many fun things they could do that would really help the scene. But hey, if there genuinely is a top-tier, high-caliber, decent festival that comes back every year and gets a lot of the casual PvEers and people who think that PvP is not for them and people who don't really try World vs. World and people who think it's too toxic and all that stuff, if you can actually get those into the game types once a year at these big flashpoints, many will linger because they will realize that PvP is the most fun, best aspect of Guild Wars 2. And so having a flashpoint once a year could be very good. It just depends on what that festival is and how confident we are that the devs have got a cool idea. I certainly don't have any off the top of my head, and I spend most of my adult life thinking about how to improve this game, so I wonder what they've got. And finally, they say this sort of discussion of projects that we've kept under wraps until now is a departure from how we've been communicating for a while. It's our hope that through posts like this, we can help clarify for you what our priorities and goals are for the game. Now, look, there's a suggestion here. We might get more. And earlier, they suggested they were going to do another one as well. After the finale, I think it was. And while this isn't everything we have planned for the game, it at least gives you a better insight into its development. The team is passionate about not only supporting Guild Wars 2, but continuing to grow it alongside all of you. Thanks for your time, and see you in game. Z. I genuinely think this is the best thing Z has done as director. As much as the remit of a game director is to engage with the community and, you know, keep them comfortable and understanding where everyone's going, be that bridge between the two in as much as that's a part of the role, I think this is brilliant. And as to the details of some of these, I'm a lot more excited about some than I am of others. But there you have it, guys. I think the question on many of our minds right now is, why not announce this earlier? Well, at least they did it now. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll keep you up to date with this as more details come out, and maybe we'll do one of these particular videos digging into one of these issues and how maybe they can deliver it in a really fun way. But I'll let you guys see what you think about that. Cheers, everyone. Take it easy, and I'll see you for more Super Adventure Box very soon.